All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the panel on commercializing across continents. My name is Pieter Wijffels. I'm a partner at NLC Health Ventures. We are a Dutch-based but globally operating venture builder. We have about 70 portfolio companies. We also have a fund that invests in all of these ventures. Prior to becoming a partner at NLC, I spent 16 years in Philips across 3 continents. I spent 6 years living in China, 4 years in the US, and the rest was Europe, where I'm also from, as you can probably tell by my accent. So I have a personal kind of affinity with this topic, and I'm very glad to host the panel today. I'd just like to go, down the row and ask the other panel members to introduce themselves as well, starting with Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff Sirek. I'm the CEO of PRIA Healthcare. We are a strategic reimbursement services company and market access. I have been in the med tech industry for about 30 years, commercializing products. I've gone concept to commercialization with 7 products worldwide and worked for big companies, private equity, and I look forward to speaking with the group today.
Hi there, Tim Still, an operating partner with Revival Healthcare. I have been in medical technology for just about 35 years. A lot of those years have been in medical diagnostics and tools. Been a CEO a handful of times, and I'm currently looking at additional investments and sitting on some boards. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. So I'm Diego Serrano. I'm an investor at the healthcare group at Sofina. Sofina is a global investor with $10 billion in assets under management, give or take. We invest globally in growth stage companies, and so usually commercial stage medical device companies within the medtech sector. Before that, I worked in M&A advisory for a couple of years. I worked in an earlier stage venture capital firm focused on medical devices as well. And after that, I joined one of those companies and worked with them in corporate development and expansion. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you all. So to start this discussion, every company dreams of becoming global at some point, right? We don't start thinking, let's stick inside of one country and, scale there. However, having said that, there are good and bad reasons for commercializing across continents. Yeah. So I'd like to start by just asking the question, maybe starting with Tim. What are some good and some bad reasons to go global for scale-up companies in health tech?
Well, it's been interesting. I've had a chance to be involved with a lot of smaller companies that are trying to bring an innovative product out to market, get into as many markets as they can, and grow share. And I've had the privilege of working with a number of founders in all of those roles. And what I see is a bit of an ignorance with an awful lot of founders and companies that start out in trying to commercialize on a global basis. Mm-hmm. And I mean that from the standpoint of not appreciating some of the market access challenges and reimbursement and regulatory that some of the markets have. And now that I'm a little bit more on the investing side, and I'm seeing these companies come and pitch us for money, and I see founders coming in and saying, well, we want to go global. We think our product is better than the current product, and this is why we're going to win. And then you start to ask questions about what's your priority for market access? Is your product reimbursed in that market? Have you done the regulatory research of what it's going to cost to get the clinical validation done in order to get that product accepted? And I guess I probably shouldn't call it ignorance, but I guess it would just be the lack of appreciation for local regulatory and market access knowledge that you need to have at the company. So I've been fortunate where I've been involved with companies that have done that well. I've also been involved with companies where it's been more of a challenge. So I think that it's really the best approach based on the product type and what they're really trying to do. Medical diagnostics is going to be different than medical devices. And I think really more oftentimes than not, founders and companies need to start with market access. And I think that's one of the big things that they miss.
Yeah. So that is the perfect bridge to Jeff, because you live and breathe market access. Do you also want to weigh on this topic?
Yeah, I did not pay you, Tim. Appreciate that. I think, first of all, it's important to understand every country is different. Every technology matches a different country. right? I mean, you can't just have one product that's good in Japan, good in Europe, good in the United States. It really needs to match the geography of where you're going to be attempting to commercialize the products. Plus, I mean, we're here in London. Has anybody heard of the NHS? It takes a year and a half to commercialize with the NHS here. FDA approval in the U.S. takes a short period of time, but it takes a lot longer to get reimbursement, to build evidence, to get society support, to build these areas to make sure you can sell the product, because if it doesn't get reimbursed, people are not going to buy the product across the United States for sure. So there's pathways and different ways to approach the business.
Yeah, so thank you. And so Diego, to also ask your perspective on this. So there are, if you start with the end in mind as a company, right? So why do you want to even scale globally? How do you guys coach your portfolio companies on that?
Yeah. So just a little disclaimer, I'll say, if you're here to learn how to commercialize, better listen to Tim and Jeff, because I'm not the one to to teach anyone anything about commercializing. But maybe I can give, as you said, the perspective from an investor point of view. And I would also say that this there's why do you want to commercialize, and obviously I think Tim and Jeff will contribute here, but you also need to prepare a stable base to really be able to commercialize where you think you have to. But I think from an investor perspective, it's also interesting to keep in mind the end goal of the company. I think when we look at commercial stage companies, we can quickly see if the commercial efficiency for that company is going to be there whatsoever. And that's not to say that it's a bad thing. You have a bad company if you cannot reach commercial efficiency per rep for your product. But the reality is that within medical devices, sometimes it's very hard to do this. So as investors, I think we're always cautious of, okay, is this company going to be an independent company in the future? Can it be an independent company in the future? And thus, is the founder or the management team aligned on what kind of company they want to be, and how are they building their sales strategy for that end goal?
Yeah, so to build on that a little bit more, Tim, you, if mistaken, you have some serious exits under your belt. So if you look through the lens of potential acquirers, many of us are, realize that our companies cannot scale indefinitely, and at some point a strategic will hopefully show up and acquire us. Well, how do they look at, the commercializing globally? Is that important to them? What do they really look for?
In the situations where I've been involved in, this might sound oversimplified, but it's really if the company has had strategic thought in what their commercialization rollout is going to be. Too oftentimes founders will, everyone has the pitch deck where they want to talk about market opportunity. And the easiest thing to do is to look at the number of people in a given country. And then they say, well, in France, there's this many. In Spain, there's this many people. But they don't go down the next level to find out that kind of testing in that particular country doesn't even exist.
It would take a year just to get registration.
Let alone get the registration. And I've literally been on the other side now as an investor, where I have seen founders come up and say that they want to roll out in a given country, and that kind of testing is not even reimbursed. So from an investor standpoint, we have some hesitation. And that translates to the strategics. Right. And strategics are going to want to see a company that has a well-thought commercialization plan. You don't have to go everywhere at once. You don't have to go global at the start. It's better to be successful and maybe penetrate in one particular market and do well and get some clinical data that you can use to then pursue different markets. It involves IP. It involves reimbursement. It involves regulatory. So strategics are going to look at that. And as someone that's led companies with founders, the advice that I give founders all the time is don't be ashamed to get the expertise at the company that you don't have. It's impossible to know all of these different things in every market to be successful commercializing. Get some expertise.
Yep.
And maybe, Tim, if I can add to that, I think, I was thinking about what you were saying about, pretty much looking at the market top down versus bottom up. So top down being how big is this market potentially. I think, it's a little bit of dangerous message that is passed to founders many times, that investors only look at huge markets, and that's how that message is received by founders many times is, okay, I need to make sure that this pitch says that we have a huge market. An interesting story, and it may resonate, is the Organox story, for example. The transplant industry is not the biggest industry out there, and the liver transplant industry is even a smaller part of that. I think Organox has been one of the most successful exits for the year. And when we're looking at it as investors, which we invested in their latest round, we were very lucky on timing. But in any case, we were looking at the market, and when you look at that market, it's not one of those that you say, okay, this is huge. But when we talk to management, the ability that they had to convey what their patients wanted, what their patients were, getting from the product, and how well they were able to put together the plan and how they were going to grow and compete against the other main competitor in the market, it gave us the confidence to really bet on them at that time and say, okay, we think that within this market, this company has the ability to really capture it. Yeah. Despite not being a huge one.
Sometimes the bigger markets are the worst places to go,
yeah.
Quite honestly, based upon the technology and the needs of that area.
Yeah.
Hey, so Jeff, building a little bit on that. So, we really like entrepreneurs that are pragmatic and, go-getters and go after opportunities. But when you think about global scale-up, that's also risky, right? So we have portfolio companies that come back from a conference like this, and they've met a hospital group from Greece, and they think, I have to go to Greece now. And then we're like, is this really the right, use of your resources and time? So maybe contentious question, because we don't know the nationalities in the room, but what are no-go areas from your perspective?
Has anybody commercialized in China before? How long does it take? 3 years?
Oh, forever.
That's not a good area. Yeah. But I think it's really important to think about the landscape and the evidence that's needed here. If you're going to go in the U.S. and the society support need, the KOLs, I've seen way too many CEOs go in too early and commercialize too early with all the evidence in place and experts. And when you do that, you really falter, and you have to come back and re-up and over again. So really be careful to understand these markets and bring in experts, I think is really important.
Yeah. So you mentioned China. I lived there for 6 years. All my kids were made in China, so I have a special place in my heart for China.
I didn't mean that poorly.
No, deep love for wonderful place. One of the thoughts, of course, I think when you're growing your business, you need to be conscious in the choices you make. And I'm curious about the two investors on the stage. When somebody has traction in China, has a commercial partnership in China, maybe has an investor from China, how do you guys look at that? Does that influence your investment choice in the company at all?
Should I go? Please. Yeah, we have a team in Singapore that covers the Asian markets, and we actively look at companies from China as well. Of course, they're completely different dynamics, but it is not it's not a problem for us necessarily, as we have a full entity in Singapore, and we're looking at the full Asian market. Although I understand that it can be a little bit challenging for other investors that may not have built that presence there, and I cannot give you it depends. Will be my answer.
I would just say it's another example of get the right expertise in the local market.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I can continue to see companies now that want to go into China because they say the numbers are huge. Well, that's great. But they don't think about their IP. They don't think about they have to manufacture the product there locally. They don't think about pricing. They don't think about the margin.
Local commercial team they need and managing that team.
Yeah, it's you need to get the local expertise, and you don't have all the answers.
So this reminds me when I was living there, we'd go for drinks in the bar street on Friday with all the expats, and every Friday a new Dutch guy would show up and say, I'm going to sell the famous Dutch caramel cookies in China, because if only 1% of the Chinese eats this, then I'm rich. And it was another Dutchman every Friday, and they all filled. And I think that goes exactly to your point of that's not how market access works. You need guys like Jeff to as well.
You really do. And, I'm obviously from the States. And so I get approached, and I have been involved with a lot of companies that have operations in Europe and they want to come to the U.S. because the U.S. is the biggest market, right? And you have a founder who has a really novel product, and they say, we want to go to the U.S. It's 40% of the market. We think we know how to do it. And then you start to ask the founder about their strategy. Now, oftentimes the strategy and the plan is more important than what their actual results are in the eyes of a strategic. You basically say, what is your timeline for getting your funding, getting your clinical data, getting your market access, getting your reimbursement? And oftentimes their eyes start to glaze. And it's for the U.S. being 40% for most folks, it's astonishing to me that companies that are based outside of the U.S. think they have the expertise and the knowledge to get into that market without not necessarily Jeff's group, but a group like Jeff to come in and assist and help validate the plan. It's just so critical, and to me, it's so fundamental. So when I see founders now coming to pitch for capital that haven't done that, it's usually a pretty quick meeting.
Yeah. Hey, so to build a little bit on what you said earlier, Tim, about the team. Do we have founders in the room? Anyone? Okay, so I have some bad news for you. The average number of founders that are needed to get from the start of a company to the exit of a company is 4.6. And there is a reason for this, right? And there's an average, so that means some people, may take it all the way, but that's not the expected journey of a venture. And because, as the famous saying goes, horses for courses. Scaling is a different job than starting, etc. So, and Tim, you referred to this earlier, right? That sometimes difficult discussions with founders have to be had when you start commercializing. Can you open that box a little bit more for us?
Well, I think when you look at raising capital and you want to get into the U.S. market, more often than not, boards and investors want to have a commercially experienced CEO come in and help to raise capital and to lay out the plan. And with founders, if you can get the founder to feel that you're coming in to make their baby and the dream come true, then it's a workable situation. But that's not always the case. I've worked with 4 different founders at 4 different companies, and every one of them was different.
There's an emotional attachment there that you have to work.
There is.
Well,
and it's usually not the situation where the new leadership is coming in to try to take anything away. It's just try to make it more successful. I do have a lot of experience there, and I think if founders can just open up their eyes and their ability to take in some expertise that they don't have, brilliant in all the ways they are, that it would really benefit them. And it is
be open
to have a founder carry it all the way through.
Yeah. Hey, and so if you could you share a couple of examples about what makes scaling up such a different game from starting up?
Well, in the diagnostic side, where I see an awful lot of companies fail, candidly, is that they have a wonderful product in research and development, and then they fail getting through manufacturing and operationalizing it and scaling it. So let's use a point-of-care system as an example. We're all familiar now with it because of COVID, right? Point-of-care testing. That cartridge that is used to test for that test, where's that going to be manufactured? What's that going to cost? Do they have the scale? Do they have the ability? Oh, by the way, why is that important? Because during COVID, from a regulatory standpoint, you could not get approval to sell your product unless you were able to manufacture at a certain level within 3 months of making that product. So once again, this kind of speaks to your need to have that expertise and knowledge.
I was going to say, how do you get there? You need the experts in operations, right? Where to manufacture, here, overseas, wherever that's going to be. Very niche understanding.
Yeah, so that's an area where I see a lot of companies have a challenge.
Yeah. Hey, and Jago, what about you guys? How do you look at, let's say, founders that have done a great role getting the company to where it is, but that may not be, don't have the skill sets for the next step?
Yeah. Well, I would argue that none of us have the skill sets to take a project to the next level, if it really is the next level, right? But some people are more aware of that and others are less aware of that. I think we love founder-led companies or management-led companies. We are a growth equity investor, but we have a family office background, and I think for us, seeing that the founder is pushing and wants to take things to the next level is very relevant. That's not to say that lack of skills will always be there, I believe, depending on the size. For us, it will be more a matter of how pragmatic is this founder and how well has he been preparing for the next stage of the company.
Yeah.
Across different industries, but specifically this one, there are founders out there who are critical thinkers enough to really start preparing for that next phase in advance and hire people that would have
some learn along the way.
Yes, exactly. Right? But have prepared for that and have started hiring people that could be saying it's strange that this founder is managing over this person because this other person has so much more experience and seems to be so much more knowledgeable. But then there are some CCOs that are not interested in the CEO position, and there are CEOs or founders that are so good at managing people, understanding the next stage and giving responsibility that they can manage that transition. So for us, it's more a question, can this founder manage that transition and is he pragmatic about it?
Yeah. Love it. So maybe as a gift to the founders in the room, how do you guys test for this mental flexibility that is needed?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Diego, take that on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's no black or white, of course, but when I talk with a founder, it's a matter of seeing how well prepared he is for what is coming up, and the transparency in the conversation that we will be having. If someone tells me no, there's no challenges ahead, that is a red flag, right? Because there are challenges ahead. A question is that the ones that you don't know about what they're going to be, are you thinking about them already or not? Are you planning for the future or not? And it's a huge ask, by the way.
Do they have the right guidance, the right people helping them do this, find the right experts?
Yeah, of course. But and I think that's it's critical, and to surround yourself with good people that can help you. But I don't want to be the one telling you to do it. I want you to come to the conversation with a plan for it already.
Yeah.
Well, and the other brutal truth that I was just going to share with the group, and I'll put this to both of you, gentlemen, is when investors are looking at putting money into a company, they're going to look at the talent that is at the senior level of the company and the talent of people on the board. Have they done it before? And if they have people that have done it before, you are much more likely to get an investment for a founder-led company if they have that talent around them. If they don't, it's going to be a lot harder to convince investors that you have the chops that's necessary to really make it work.
Yeah. Hey, and Jeff, for you, I mean, so yes, you want to send a check, right? That's your business, but you also want the company to be successful. And I'm sure every now and then a company shows up at your doorstep and asks you for advice. And then you look at the company, think, yeah, I can give you an infinite amount of advice, but you're not going to be able to implement this. How do you handle situations like that?
Well, I think we met 60 companies here, and we're giving them different advice at different angles and trying to understand where they're at in the process and assist them and in those processes and try to get away from the BS, right? And so they're not BSing themselves and helping them understand with the dollars they have where they're going to go and get in early in understanding the reimbursement process and the landscape so that they don't get into the traps that Tim and others have talked about here.
Yeah. So you're trying to be also brutally honest when
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's probably the only way to get,
And they respond well to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, so before we open the floor to some questions, one final topic I think we should cover is how do you operationalize all of this? So we are now, that a company has a plan. They have done their market research. They know for a fact that there is a need for their product in that market. What happens next? How do you guys coach the companies on this? Maybe starting with Diego, do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, I think, again, not the one to give a lot of advice on how to do things commercially for the founders out there. But maybe one thing that I can talk about is what we look for when we're looking at these companies. And maybe especially for the companies that are in an earlier phase, they are already maybe in the US starting to sell their first devices in a region or a couple regions, a couple hospitals. It's show me how you plan to do these sales motions efficient. And I don't care if the number is 5 or 12 at this stage. I rather see a sales motion that can be efficient and expanded. If I'm going to be giving the next 40 million to expand the commercial team and the commercial plan, I want to see something that I can believe in, that you can replicate, rather than being in 28 regions and just having sold a couple devices in a couple hospitals with little repeat sales. That would be the only advice. Try to concentrate first. Try to get the motion right in a couple centers and demonstrate to the investors that you can replicate this expanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe yesterday I met what I thought was a really good company that had a very exciting technology. I then probed them on their scale-up plan, and they said, yeah, we are planning to partner with a strategic, but if that doesn't come through, we will just use distributors. And then that for me was a red flag.
Yeah.
So,
it can work with the right product, but you have to have a direct team usually in concert with that most of the time.
Yeah. So my question to you is, what is the right mix? How do you puzzle together the right go-to-market plan?
We'll go first.
Oh boy. I don't think there's any one answer that I can give to that. It's really going to be product and company dependent. Too often times you see founders and CEOs come in, they say they want to commercialize, and they're going to be picked up by one of the bigger companies because their product is great, and they haven't thought through what that looks like from a commercial standpoint. So use an example. I was involved with a company that had a point of care device that tested for a particular type of tests. And they said that their ideal company to buy them was one of the bigger companies. When I probed them about what their commercial strategy was, they said, oh, we'll just let the sales force of the bigger company handle that product. It makes sense. They didn't do the research to know that big company did not have a sales force that served that segment of the market. And in order for that strategic to buy them, they would have to invest in a complete team, sales, marketing, everything, to satisfy that market segment. So
plus they have to prioritize at the big companies, right?
They
have their own priorities to worry about. So
yeah. So there's no one solution. I think it's really going to be product and company dependent.
Yeah. Hey, maybe for Diego. So the plan B can get acquired, right? That's usually a pipe dream, but it can be the plan B. But you also always, in such negotiations, even you need to have a credible plan A, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't have a credible plan A, even if they buy you, it'll be at pennies on the dollar because they know that you don't have a choice. That's not a good negotiation starting point. When you guys look at financial plans, how do you look at the plan A, plan D, B thing?
Sure. So again, this is I'm talking about ourselves and not the rest of investors who may be looking at different things. We do not underwrite sales to larger M&A acquirers. We're really looking to see whether the company can go independent on its own. And this is, not the majority of the companies out there, and there's no one size fits all. But we really, really need to believe in the plan A. If we do not see the plan A happening, we don't even take into consideration the plan B. Again, our case is not the standard. There are many investors out there that will invest or underwrite other things. But for us, that plan A and what we've been talking about, being ready to take your company all the way and be an independent company, it's very, very important.
It's fundamental. And so I've been fortunate that an awful lot of the companies that I've led, they have been acquired by one of the larger companies. And some of the folks here that I know that I've worked with in the past, when I would go to one of these companies to lead it, I was often asked, what is your plan for the company based on your background? You're probably here to make sure the company gets acquired. And that was never the case. The case was always, we want to run the company in the best way possible. And then if you're doing a good job at that, opportunities present themselves along the way. And candidly, it's not going to be the founder's choice. It's going to be your investor's choice. But if you have the mindset that you're just building a company to get acquired, to commercialize, you're not going to be very successful. And investors are going to smell that out. And that's not what they're looking for. We look for what we call a high do, say, do ratio. When the founder says, this is the market we're going to get into, this is what we want to do they do it? When we check back 6 months, do they do it in 12 months? And if that model works, then they're going to have strategic opportunities to present themselves along the way. That's the better way to build a company.
Yeah, I love it. So the way we look at this, we have there's about 70 portfolio companies, targeting different markets, different geographies, but also different strategics. So, but we have quite a bit of data on, when do strategics start engaging? And what is very clear to us, certainly in most of medtech, not all, but most of medtech, is that you need to have buying before commercial traction is a thing of the past in most of our businesses. You need commercial traction, and that means not just, if you're a European company, which probably most here are, it's not one country. You need a couple of countries because you need to prove the reimbursement works. The doctors, the daily practice of the doctors, they will adopt it. You need repeat sales. You need the customer to come back. There's a lot of innovation, gathering dust in the corner of an OR somewhere. So you need to prove that this thing is actually being used. And then what you probably also need is to jump to the US, even though that is really hard. But yeah, that is the biggest market in the world. And once you start doing that, that is when strategics start taking notice. But that means you have to commercialize across continents. In most of the cases, you have to do it yourself before you gain any interest from the strategics. That's at least our conviction. Hey, so at this point, before we go to closing remarks, we have time for some questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Very, very helpful presentation. You talked about local expertise. Are there, not by name, but why not just link up? Let's take China for an example. A lot of established companies that are U.S. companies with Chinese divisions. Is that a bad idea to link up with a Chinese division and say, establish a licensed relationship and leverage their market access and their sales expertise?
If they'll do that, right, because they have their own priorities, it's better to get experts that can help you commercialize in those areas. And there's people that can help you do that, for sure.
Yeah, so I'd like to weigh in on this one. A lot of people don't want to go to China because they're afraid of copycats, right? They'll steal my IP. Now, so first of all, I always say if you don't go, you don't have any sales, and if you go and they steal your IP, then you also don't have any sales. Yeah, you've put in some effort, but there's not a big difference. Chinese companies don't generally steal your IP and then make it global. Because there is IP laws that will protect you outside of China. And inside of China, the best protection you can have is a partner. A good local partner that has the right government connections. So scaling in China is, from my perspective, only feasible in a partnership. That's my experience. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for this fantastic panel. We've discussed a little bit how to scale up, for example, like POC devices. But I'm from Nimble Diagnostics, so we are developing a rather more intricate medical device that uses microwave to monitor coronary stents, detect blockages or fractures before problems arise, etc. And you can have a follow-on when patients don't have one. But our machine has very specific characteristics in electromagnetic settings. There's components that are really difficult to get. We are using lab equipment because it's not a component that anyone is using anywhere to commercialize. So we're struggling on finding a good partner that can help us manufacture a good prototype with these parts that are difficult, the antennas are very specific. We have patents over the antennas, the material inside the antennas, the lab equipment that goes inside to generate the microwave as we want it. So what, for example, type of advice could be in that type of setting? Because our type of device as well, it's not something repeatable in the same hospital. So each hospital may buy 1 to 3 devices and will last for 5 to 7 years. So I would imagine that repeated sales will be most like different hospitals in the same region or same country. Would that be similar to what Diego said about having some hospitals and repeated sales in the hospital, which in our case, the device itself, it's difficult to replicate further, like an ultrasound, for example, they're not buying it constantly.
A lot. Okay, so again, so repeat sales is something that investors like to see. And if you don't have a device that can have repeat sales, or you don't have disposables, you may need to think about how can I manufacture this product in a way that I can charge per use, or I can
Establish contracts, for example, for 8 years to have at least the minimum measurements, we have software license.
Yeah. It definitely complicates, and when you think about product design, it definitely complicates it, because how do you measure a per click case and such? It definitely makes things harder. But I would think about this whenever you are putting together, how am I passing the product to the hospitals, and it will complicate things nonetheless. But I think it's manageable, again, with the right maybe advice or the right team. That's how you should probably think about it.
You might not have all of the answers, but I think one critical piece that I see that's not in a lot of pitch decks when folks are trying to raise capital is show me the cost of goods roadmap as you scale your product. And candidly, it's one of the most overlooked pieces of information that founders and companies don't spend enough time on. And it's not just important for your business, because to his point, there's a chance that you might need to design the product differently to get the kind of scale. But even beyond that, anybody who's going to want that asset later, such as a strategic, they're going to want to say, okay, in my hands, at my volume, what is this product going to look like? So it's worth doing everything that you're doing to really challenge product design, volume growth, to really get a good handle on that.
Love it. Hey, so to close this off, maybe ask each of the panel members short closing remarks, with the main question being, what is the one thing or the main thing you would like the audience to take away from this panel?
Jeff, I think they need to get in early and get some experts to help.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tim?
I would say the same. And one of the biggest areas that people miss is market access and clinical validation. Start that earlier. Do not wait until the end.
Thank you. Diego?
From an investor perspective, just be transparent with the people you're talking to. Creating a trustful relationship is one of the most important things you can do in this industry. And best of luck. It's not easy for anyone.
Thank you. So thank you very much.